Hey, welcome. This is a special edition of I Date Money. I'm your hostess, wealth activator Lisa Drennan. And today we have our monthly visionary of panel experts. And guess who I brought on? I brought in the bookkeeper, accounting, CPA experts, all the numbers people. I love it. I love it. I love it. This is amazing because all of you, and any coaches out there, six-figure coaches, 5, 7, 8-figure coaches, what's your biggest nemesis in your business? Paying the taxes, right? So these ladies are all experts in their field. We have some profit first professional tax people here. We have people who've been doing bookkeeping and accounting for years, and they absolutely love it. Their clients are 10xing their profits. So welcome, and thank you for joining us. Leave some comments and some love below. We are live, and this is going to be uploaded to the YouTube Money Talks and the podcast I Date Money. So be sure to tag your friends. So today we're going to start off with Samantha. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, my name is Samantha Palisoul. I am the owner and head bookkeeper in charge at Little Town Bookkeeping, where I help passion-powered entrepreneurs expand their capacity for serving others without getting bogged down in the numbers by maintaining a bookkeeping system built for scalability. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Lisa, for having me.
Yeah, I love that. I love the name of your little bookkeeping.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Thank you. Okay, next up, Regan.
Hi, I'm Regan Bashara. I am the numbers witch. I've been doing bookkeeping for almost 10 years now. I founded All Ease Accounting after I quit my bookkeeping job of 7 years. And I help my clients stay relaxed about their money instead of all the anxiety and stress that money can sometimes bring up for you. Thanks for having me again, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. I love your name too, All Ease. As soon as I hear that, I'm like, yes, numbers are easy. It could be fun. It doesn't have to be like all bogged down. And all I picture is like all the ladies out there with their receipts flying in the air, right? Thank you, Regan. Paige, you're up.
Hey, I'm Paige Papaioannou. So I'm the owner of Books by Paige, Books by Paige Accounting, and now IncreaseMyBottomLine.com. I'm a profit first professional. So Increase My Bottom Line is where we do more of the coaching, and Books by Paige is bookkeeping, taxes, and payroll. I started my bookkeeping firm when I was pregnant with my first son. I now have 3. And at the time, I wanted to start something that I would be able to hire pregnant women or stay-at-home parents to be able to be home with their kids and afford to do so, which was pre-COVID. Remote jobs weren't as easy to obtain. So now I've been able to accomplish that. And so now I'm taking it to the next level of coaching entrepreneurs in profit first and allowing entrepreneurial women or parents to be home with their kids and afford to do so.
I love that. That's beautiful. And what a clever name, Books by Paige. I love that. You guys all have really cool names for your business. This is awesome. Courtney, you're up.
Hi there, I'm Courtney Boudet, and I am the owner of eNumber Cruncher, and I help small business owners do their own bookkeeping until they can hire a bookkeeper. There are quite a few small business owners who just take ownership of their bookkeeping, and I wanted to provide a service for them so that they could do it well, and when they are ready to go to a bookkeeper, they will be all settled.
I love that. Thank you so much. So curious, when you think of bookkeeping, this wasn't one of the questions in the emails, just so you know, I'm going to kind of throw you for a loop. When you think of, connecting with a client about bookkeeping, like what's the first response that they get from you? Like when they hear bookkeeping?
So most small business owners dread bookkeeping. So their first response to me is that they haven't done it in quite some time. So that's kind of where I help the small business owner who's like 6 to 12 months behind catch up quickly so that then they can take ownership of their bookkeeping. By the time many people get to a bookkeeper, they're embarrassed, to be quite frank. I'm sure that the rest of the panel can attest, like they try to clean it up themselves. And I'm just like, no, you don't need to do that. You can, have a professional do it for you. And then either kickstart them to do it themselves or, outsource to another bookkeeper like on this panel.
Yeah, I love that, because as a wealth activator, I have an accountant. And one of the things I hear from people is, well, I'm like, I'm going to help you 10x your profit, right? And I'm a profit first professional as well as just like Paige and Courtney, you're profit first too, right? Yep. And when you think about that, I always say, like, I hear, well, my accountant takes care of it all. It reminds me of that sign by Joe Walsh, and I'm like, well, is your accountant going to help you multiply your money and show you what you're investing in or what? And I'm like, I have an accountant. I don't know the tax laws. And I mean, how many times, especially in America, have the tax laws changed? And one of the biggest things I hear is, well, I don't want to pay my taxes. So it's interesting. But Paige, same question.
Yeah. Just for what you just said though, like, I don't want to pay my taxes. That is such a common thing. And because I think the accounting firm in general has had a shift where before it was like, we're going to help you avoid paying your taxes, to where now it's more of, you're an entrepreneur, you're here to make money. We're going to help you make money and set the money aside so you can pay those taxes. And here's also some, the best ways to lower your tax bill, but still doing it the right way, where you're never going to cross into ethical, boundaries as well as legal. But I think now, like, we're so much more big picture, big vision, and all of that, rather than just like taxes. But yeah, so most of my clients, I would say, would come to me because they probably have a lot of debt. Like, it's a little, I think, different than Courtney's scenario. But a lot of my clients come to me with debt, and they're like, I don't think I make good money, but I don't think I can even afford your services. So tell me about them. And so we have to reel it back and be like, no, tell me about you, and I'll see if we can help you. So what's your situation? And I'm going to tell you, like, it's not a one size fits all solution, but let's go through it. Let's see what the strategy is. Can you do this on your own? Do you need some help with it? Where do you need help? And all of the pieces that fall into it.
Yeah. And it's just like you said, it is not a one size fits all. It's so customized. And when people realize that and what their needs are, that's when they're going to be able to hit their goals. And I retired from the Social Security Administration after a 30-year career. I love when people pay their taxes. It supports all these wonderful programs that we have, and everyone eventually wants to retire. And Social Security is a good part of that retirement. And so pay your taxes, everyone, and enjoy it. Love it. Be thankful for it. Samantha, what's your take on it?
Yeah, when clients come to me, I find that it's common for them to feel like they don't even want to know. Like, they don't want to know what I do. They just want me to do it. And, I'm perfectly happy to step in and do that. But I do also think it's really important to have that kind of like basic understanding of what's going on, knowing how to read the reports that I actually send them, and understanding, that how money flows through their business. It's so important because just like, when we think of, our money mindset and thinking of things like abundance versus scarcity, is like, think about how like money flowing through your business in a way that is structured and, easy. Think about how that would make you feel. And
oh, I think we lost you. All right, we'll hold that thought. I think Samantha got bumped out. Regan, why don't you go ahead, and when Sam gets back on, we'll let her finish.
Okay. So when I first interact with business owners, and I resonate with everything that the other ladies said, but people come to me and they're like, I just don't even know where to start. I have a huge mountain of paperwork that I have not sorted through, and it's overwhelming to think about it, and I don't have a system. And so what I've really done is distill down, all of my years of experience to try to help folks get to that starting point and not be afraid to take the next step, which is to start being organized now. Like, yes, of course, we have catch-up projects that we're always working on for folks, but really it is crucial for me to help my clients establish a system right now so that they can keep it updated as we kind of go back and clean up their overwhelming paperwork that they don't want to deal with.
Yeah, I love that. Go ahead, Sam, you're back. Welcome back.
sorry about that.
No worries.
It looks like I was with you and then everything froze.
Yeah.
So yeah, just what I was saying was that, instead of having every sale be like a mad dash to like, make sure everything lands in the right place and gets put in the right place, like if everything could just be easy and flow nicely, like the weight of that lifting off your shoulders, in addition to having somebody to support you in your finances, I think is huge. And it's something that people don't even really think about, like, because I know that bookkeeping and accounting, I think people, put it in kind of the scarcity bucket of like, oh no, like the sky is falling. We want to make sure we're saving over here. And, so to think about it in more of a abundance light, I think is something that I hope that we're moving towards in our industry. So yeah.
Yeah, great point too, because a lot of times when people, will open up their business, like, oh, I'm going to leave my 9 to 5 and go into entrepreneurship. I'm going to start this coaching business, and they have no business plan. So I can see why their books are crazy, because they're just kind of winging it, right? And, they're used to getting this steady paycheck from their employer, and now they have to pay themselves. And I see this all the time. Entrepreneurs do not even think about paying themselves first. They will pay themselves the leftovers, or they'll take all of their money and put it right back into the business. I'm like, rule number 1, do not do that. Why did you go into business for yourself? Because you didn't want that boss. You wanted to have substantial income, right? So what would be the best advice that you can give someone, especially someone who's starting off, or, maybe they're moving from 5 to 6 figures and they really don't have a business plan, a structure into place? How would you suggest that they structure their business? We'll start with you, Paige.
Sure. In terms of the entity type?
Yes.
In terms of the entity type, I think the one we see most commonly is start an LLC. The difference is, like, if you don't have a registered business, like an LLC or a corporation within your state, versus not having one and doing all the business stuff and making money anyway, is protection. So there's like 2 sides of forming an entity. One is legal, one is accounting. We'll speak more on the accounting side, of course, as accountants, but the legal side is if you have an LLC called a limited liability company, that's exactly what it protects you on. If someone sues the company, they're not suing you for your house, your personal house, or your personal assets. That's all protected because this is separate from you. A corporation also has legal separation where your assets can be protected, but there's but now we're going into the accounting side of which is the better choice for you. Usually at the 5-6 figure mark, and not always, but usually you're better off as the LLC. And then once you make enough net profit, then you can move to what's called an S-Corp, which is not actually a legal entity, but more of a tax election that can save you money. But just as with everything, if it seems to be too good to be true, it usually is. So there's rules around how you can be an S-Corp versus not. The number one we talk about is owner's compensation. So now you have to get on payroll. So we need you to be in a position to where you're making enough of a profit to put yourself on payroll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people think that's so simple. And I know there's a lot of confusion about the LLC. And I know a lot of business owners will immediately go get an LLC and they have no idea what their tax status is. Like, they don't understand that there's a difference. So Regan, can you answer that question too? How should somebody structure their business?
Yeah, I totally agree with and reflect everything that Paige just said. I see a lot of folks giving advice in like social media posts that is like, just become an S-Corp so you can save money on taxes. And I'm like, hold up. Like, we have to talk about you being able to pay yourself a salary. So I'm really glad that Paige brought that up, because that is a crucial thing to consider and actually look at on your reports. But like she said as well, like if you're an LLC and you're just going to be taxed as a sole single member LLC. But I do actually recommend making that registration at the state level too, because like she said, you have kind of some legal protections that separate you personally from the business entity. But in terms of taxes, it's really not like a huge difference in how you get taxed if you're just a sole proprietor. So I recommend folks from the very beginning, if people are going to start paying you money, that means they take you seriously. You need to take your business seriously. Set up the LLC.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a good point too. I think a lot of the DIY out there for the LLC, they missed that completely. So thank you for sharing that. Samantha.
All right. Yes, I love this because Paige and Regan both covered a lot of the, accounting side stuff, how you're taxed, how it's different. For for the LLC, a lot of people think it is a tax designation, and they're like, oh, I'm going to get my LLC. And it really is just the legal protection. And then, it allows you in the future to switch to electing S-Corp. I think you have to have that LLC protection before you can make that jump from a tax perspective. But there is nothing wrong with being, a sole proprietor to get started. And I know that state to state, it's different. The process of, registering an LLC, it has different costs depending on where you are. There's a different application process depending on where you are. So if you are in a place where that LLC at the beginning feels out of reach to you, I think in California, it's like $800 or something to establish it. And I'm in Vermont, and I think it might've been 50 for me. Like, there's a big range depending on where you are. So there's nothing wrong with starting as a sole proprietor and getting an LLC eventually to give yourself that legal protection and also set you up for potentially making an S-Corp election down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. Courtney.
Sorry, it takes me a little bit longer to unmute.
No
So
worries.
the only thing that I can add, because everything that they said is great, is that you see a lot of times where it's a couple. So where the husband will start a construction business. I see this a ton in construction. He starts, and then the wife does the bookkeeping for free. And I'm going to stand on a soapbox for a second here. Because first of all, bookkeeping is never free. Okay. If you're doing it, you are paying yourself to do it. And if you're not getting paid to do it, you need to be getting paid to do it. That's like soapbox there. But also, I've seen it time and time again where then they will get divorced. And then there's nothing on paper to say what that spouse did in the business because it's under the sole proprietor. So I'm not going to advise on anything other than to say that if you are doing work in your family business, you need to be compensated for that. And you also, if you are a true owner of the business, you need to be that on paper too. So just to protect yourself and your relationship. Nobody wants anything to go wrong, but life happens, and I've seen it time and time again. So that's the one thing that I would say, in addition to everything everyone else said.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Regan, you want to add to that?
Yeah, speaking to the husband and wife scenario specifically, I live in Louisiana, which is a community property state. So it actually depends where you are, like which state you're in. In Louisiana, like I'm the sole member of my business, but my husband, if we were to ever get divorced, would technically be entitled to half of my business assets because of that community property kind of stipulation. And so it depends on which state you're in, but yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and that is a great point. And from my point of view, I'm an independent insurance broker, and a lot of, family businesses, they'll want to go into a employer group health insurance. And if the wife is working in the business, not cutting a paycheck, we can't put her on the plan as an employee. But on the other point, from after working at Social Security for over 30 years, the biggest thing I saw is, these couples would come in to file for Social Security at, say, 62 years old. The wife didn't have any earnings. She's like, well, I worked. And then, like you said, if they get divorced, there's some rules about that as far as like benefits, but the ego gets hurt, right? I did all that work in my husband's business and I didn't get a penny to show for it. And yeah, so please compensate yourself, because you would not do this for free for anyone else. And I'm curious, I just wanted to, there's a lot of financial illiteracy out there when it comes to accountants, bookkeepers, and CPAs. So if you can each address, what's the difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant and a CPA? We'll start with you, Regan.
Yeah, so there's nothing that I have that says that I'm a bookkeeper other than me just saying that I'm a bookkeeper, right? But I don't have like a CPA certification or license through my state. I'm not interested in that at all. But I believe that the CPA license or certification has gone through all the states. There is kind of a level on the federal level, it's called an enrolled agent, which is like a similar kind of licensure where they can represent different clients in front of tax representatives, IRS representatives. But yeah, yeah, I just am a bookkeeper because I started doing bookkeeping and kind of learned it on the job as a skill set. And you can, of course, have like a degree in accounting. I also don't have that. I have a degree in math and physics.
Yeah, I love that. And you just love numbers, right? And when you love numbers, you get to crunch them all day long. Like crunching on our numbers. I love that. Paige.
Okay, so I would say the difference is exactly how Regan said, a bookkeeper, you don't necessarily need a formal like education in it, but it's usually someone very organized who will keep up with, you know, the current rules on their own, and be able to organize all of the daily data into your books, create financial statements off of that. Where an accountant, I guess is next level, but I feel like now we're very much more intertwined, where the accountant was priorly known to be the one who can actually go through those financials and analyze them and tell you, oh, this is what this means, this is what happens, maybe stay even more up to date on different tax rules and things like that. Where a CPA, they have a little more skin in the game because they have the license, so they have more liability to do the right thing. They have certain credits per year that they have to get to keep educated. And this is, you know, something that they're held to in order to keep their license. Plus they have the formal education, they have public accounting experience, and, you know, they put money into this. So there's different certifications.
Yeah, thank you. And CPAs, they have to pass that really difficult test. I know my friend in high school wanted to be a CPA. She took the exam like 4 times and she could never pass it. So, Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, they explained it so well that I don't really have anything else to add to that. The only thing that I would say is if you are requesting services, to be more clear than asking for an accountant, because I find that a lot of people just say accountant when they actually mean a CPA or a bookkeeper. So just be very clear about the services that you are wanting when you're asking for referrals or recommendations.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Because sometimes you do need a CPA to handle, especially some of the more complex tax laws. I imagine too, like when you're transferring your business from, you know, like the LLC from like the self-employment default to the S or the C Corp, it might be better. So yeah, that's a great point. Samantha, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I like to think about it and describe it to other people in a way that I think is more tangible than, you know, accountant versus bookkeeper. And I like to think about doctors and nurses because we all kind of have an understanding of like how that works, right? So doctors, like accountants, are a little bit more specialized. They have maybe that higher level of education. And then the bookkeepers, like the nurse, are more, you know, they do kind of the basics, the most important things that allow the accountant or the doctor to do, you know, remain in their zone of genius and do their thing. And the bookkeepers and nurses lay the foundations and do all of the things to keep the accountants in their zone of genius, you know, able to work more efficiently, see more clients, file more taxes, you know, all those things. So when you have a good bookkeeper, or if you're doing your own bookkeeping and you're keeping good records, when you go to your accountant, they can dive right into their zone of genius without having to, you know, come back down and do some of the things that should have been done before you got there.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And then so many people can relate to that because we all know like the levels of the, you know, doctors and nurses. And then even so, like we go to nutritionists to help with our diets, you know, because as you said, everyone has their own zone of genius. So I love that. Thank you. So this is a question from one of the members in my Facebook group. She wants to know, what are the tax advantages to having employees versus independent contractors? Samantha, why don't you start?
Sure. So I'm going to actually default the tax advantages part to one of the other panelists, just because I'm not a tax professional myself. But I will say that I think one of the biggest things to keep in mind when you're considering employees versus independent contractors is that it is not an interchangeable term. You don't get to pick which one is, you know, you're going to hire, in the sense that you don't get to pick, you know, without the backing it up, basically. So I work as an independent contractor with all of my clients. I have several clients. I pick my schedule. I name my price. My clients enter into an agreement with me. And that's kind of the way that works. I am independent in the way that I run my business. Whereas as an employee is usually a little bit more, I don't want to say structured, there's structure to both, but I think as a business owner, you have a little bit more control over what an employee does. You name their wage, you set their business hours or their working hours. And you kind of have a little bit more control over what they're doing in their day-to-day tasks, whereas an independent contractor comes with a skill set already and they are doing, the tasks in that skill set. So I think that from the start, instead of first asking yourself, am I hiring an employee or an independent contractor, really understand what you want that person to do, the kind of tasks you want them to do, when you want them to do it, how much you are budgeted to pay them, how you want to pay them. And then once you have all that information, you can kind of figure out, is this person that I've described in my mind an employee or an independent contractor? And there are resources online to kind of help you figure out like which way it would go.
Great answer. Thank you. Courtney.
I agree. I am going to default to the tax item because I don't deal with that. But I will add that if you are trying to hire as an independent contractor just to like save money or something like that, I really recommend, especially if you're going into having employees, having an HR professional consultant on your team. That is so big because in California, not only do you have to pass the regular, independent contractor test, you also have an ABC test, which is even then harder. And New York, I think, is one of those places. So depending on your state, you have to be super cautious about misclassifying because there are big penalties for that. And you don't want to do that. And so as much as you save from like not putting them on payroll, if they're a true employee, you're going to pay in penalties if they catch you. And it's just not worth it. So just that's really important. So that's where, like, if you are starting to delve into having employees, especially in the state of New York or California, you need to have an HR consultant on tap. And, there are some that are pretty affordable, and those kind of things. And it doesn't have to be a big expense, but just having somebody, like I have somebody I can call her anytime and ask employee questions, and it's a reasonable rate. So they are out there.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good point. Regan.
Yeah, I am a tax preparer. I don't do like individual tax returns, but I do handle payroll for my clients, so I can speak specifically to like the payroll taxes. When it comes to whether or not somebody's going to be classified as an employee or an independent contractor who would receive like a 1099, there are 3 categories that we need to look at. And you can look on the IRS website, employee versus contractor. They actually have a form. It's like a questionnaire that you go through and check boxes to determine how someone should be classified. And those 3 categories are financial. So we kind of talked about whether or not that person is setting their own rate or if you negotiate like an hourly wage with them. And then, of course, there's the behavioral part of it. And that is, what are they doing? When are they doing it? Do you require them to wear a uniform with your logo on it? And then the last category is going to be the relationship. Do you have some sort of contractual agreement between you and that person? Now, when it comes to the tax benefits, if you have somebody who is an employee and maybe they have a $50,000 a year salary, you get to take that as a payroll expense. That's a business tax deduction. And on top of that, just their salary, you pay payroll taxes on their behalf too. That is also a business expense. But there could be the case that you may end up owing like unemployment if they were to ever file a claim and be eligible for unemployment. And then when it comes to the risks of misclassifying somebody, if you classify somebody as an independent contractor and send them a 1099 and you did not withhold taxes, and it turns out that they should have been classified as an employee, you can be subject to what's called backup withholding, which is where you basically need to go back and pay all those taxes that should have been withheld from that employee's pay. So there's a lot of there's benefits to someone being an employee, and then there's also risks of misclassification.
Yeah, thank you for that. I used to be a treasurer for 3 not-for-profits, and the last one I did, we were getting, the officers were getting stipends. And then I don't know if the law changed somewhere from like when the union got established to when I like kind of was 5 years into it. And all of a sudden I had to fill out that form that you mentioned with the IRS. And I was just like, what? No, we're not employees. And I actually like called the IRS and like, you need to walk me through this because I have no idea. And I don't want to make a mistake because, we were not for profit. I mean, I think our assets were like $300,000. So it was really small. But that's scary. Like you just bringing up that conversation, my stomach started turning. I got all like, oh my God, I remember that conversation. It was horrible to be in that position. And when I do my, as an independent insurance broker, I always have to fill out these forms when I get contracted with different carriers. And it's one of the questions is, are you subject to backup withholding? And I'm like, no, thank God, I don't want that. It's horrible. So Paige, would you like to add to that?
Sure. So I think the question was, what are the tax like advantages versus disadvantages? And just knowing we're speaking to coaches, I would say like, don't worry about that. Like the real you can write both off. So they're both going to be write-offs, tax deductions. They're both expenses to your company, but having an employee does create added paperwork. So you do, even if you didn't pay an employee for that quarter, you still need to file a quarterly tax return, payroll tax return. So there are more complicated things. So if you're ready to hire someone full-time and like, I'm going to give them direction, I'm going to maybe even supply them with their equipment, they're going to work on my systems. They're not, they're not really advising me. Now we're more of, okay, I need this done. This is the way you should do it. And just clock your hours, or this is your salary. Then you'll be ready for an employee. But if you're not there yet and your stuff is more project based, or you're hiring someone who is knowledgeable in this and can advise you on it, they probably have other clients and they're probably a contractor. So just keep them in that role because that's where they should be.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. It sounds like it's way easier just to have contractors, but I mean, as your company grows and you have more than one, I know one of my clients for my insurance business, they just went into, they got an S-Corp and they only hired one employee in they're building houses. And I thought, why would you go through all that just for one employee? Like, wouldn't you want to have like 4 or 5? Because then you're talking, you have to have workers' comp and like you said, unemployment and all those other, benefits that need to be offered, right? Vacation and sick pay. Like, no, I don't want to pay you vacation and sick pay. I want to receive it, but I don't want to pay it. So knowing all those intricacies as well. So it's really complicated. I think a lot of times coaches will come into this world and think, oh, it's going to be so easy. I'm just going to make all this money and I'm going to be, a millionaire. Like I'm going to make 6-7 figures. Like, no, it's not that easy. Right. So one of the biggest things that I come across working with my clients is that they have no clue why and what their profit and loss statement is. And they'll look at the numbers and their accountant will say, well, they said I made, $400,000, but I don't have a penny to show for it. And I don't know why. So why is it important? Like, I think there should be like a 101 class on profit and loss statement for entrepreneurs. So why is it important to understand the profit and loss, and what exactly does it show? Paige, you can go first.
Okay, yeah. So profit and loss statement is like, I would say the most known financial statement, because that's the one that your tax preparer needs to tell you how much you have to pay. So that's why business owners like at face value kind of care about it. But once we get into it and you can actually use it to make decisions, you'll see that it's like so great to understand what goes on in it. Basically what it shows is revenues. So how much you made in total sales, how much money you collected, and then all of your expenses. So to pay those contractors, to pay your softwares, to pay, to take client out to dinner, you can write all these things off because they're expenses. And then at the end of that, net those two out. Revenue minus expenses equals your net profit or net loss. In the first few years of business, it's very common to have a net loss. And then that'll tell, but now we can use that to say like, okay, why? What was my biggest expense? Did that lead to more sales? What, were my sales down where now I need to actually come up with sales goals? And I think in the coaching industry, it's a little different because it is pretty it is a lot of constant like work to get sales, right? Like usually there's a big push and you get an influx, and then you can relax a minute, fulfill those duties for your clients, and then whoop, another big push. And it's the end of the year, I don't feel like doing another big push. But now you can look at your P&L and be like, all right, do I need to do it, or can I actually relax, take a break, and plan for next quarter refreshed? So yeah.
I like that. I like that take on that, because a lot of the coaches I work with are doing endless launches. You know, they're in that hustle and that grind. And just for them to be able to look at their profit and loss statements, they're like, you know what? I don't need to do this. I get to do it if I want to. So I love that. Thank you. Regan.
Yeah, I think the profit and loss is like the star of the show when it comes to bookkeeping. Everybody knows what that is. If you reference a P&L, like everybody knows what that means. But I actually love to introduce my folks to the other financial statements that are very important to look at, and that is your balance sheet and your statement of cash flows. And we were talking about S-Corp elections earlier, like when is the right time to make that election? Looking at your statement of cash flows is going to help you determine whether or not you actually can pay yourself a salary. Don't necessarily need to be at a profit to pay yourself a salary. You just need the cash flow to be coming in so that you can put yourself on payroll. But just like Paige said, I think the profit and loss is like a great way to look at different kind of waves in your business. Like if you have a big push or something, what I send out to my clients every single month is year-to-date profit and loss, including a comparison to prior years. I want them to kind of see how their business is growing. And I don't think any business owner is like inclined to look at that for themselves. So I like to include that on my monthly financial reports for my clients, because I'm like, I want you to read this. I want you to understand, like, what did you change in your business this year? And what was the result? How is that change reflected in your numbers?
Yeah. And looking at the bigger picture for my clients, we call that the wealth activation roadmap. And I'm like, you need to look at everything, your assets, if you have debt, your income, your expenses, like, and even when we look at the expenses, the needs and the wants, like, where are you spending your money and why are you spending it this way? When we look at the business financials, the operating expenses, sometimes there's a lot of waste, and they're duplicating their efforts, and if they don't understand that, it's like, well, I don't know where my money went. Well, let's dive deeper into that. So that's why I love it when we get into the money mindset piece, like, oh, why are you spending your money that way? Like, why do you need all these subscriptions and 5 different pieces of the same tech to present your modules to your clients? Like, what's that all about? So thank you for sharing that. Samantha.
Yeah, I want to piggyback a little bit on what Regan was saying about adding in. So again, we all know the profit and loss, the P&L, that's become kind of like jargon in any business, even though it's accounting based. It's one of the few pieces of accounting jargon that everybody kind of has an idea of, right? But it's really important, like Regan was saying, to also look at your balance sheet and your statement of cash flows, because if you're only looking at your profit and loss statement, sure, you get your net income or your net profit or your net loss. But whether you're profiting in your business or taking a loss in your business doesn't speak to how much money you have in your business. So the balance sheet is going to allow you to see, what your assets are, how much money you have in the bank that's actually available to you. Your profit and loss, of course, is going to show you whether you're profiting or taking a loss. And then your statement of cash flows is going to show you, if your cash flow positive or negative, which basically the difference is, are you spending more money than you're making, which would be taking a cash flow loss, or are you making more money than you're spending, which is a cash flow positive. So I think that it's important to recognize that your profit, your cash flow, and the amount of money in the bank are all different things, and they don't all always go in the same way. Making a profit doesn't mean you have positive cash flow, and having money in the bank doesn't mean that you're not spending more than you're making. So those 3 reports will give you that big full picture view, and just the, between the balance sheet and the profit and loss statement, you see everything that's happening in your business, both sides of it. Not everything goes on the profit and loss statement. And I think that's something that is not known. Everybody assumes that everything is either income or an expense. So there's a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah. And thank you for pointing that out. And it is funny because I talk to a lot of coaches and they don't, if you say P&L, they're like, huh, what's that? They don't have that same thought pattern. Right. So, yeah, but and a lot of times they do think the profit and loss. Oh yeah, that's my picture of my business. No, it's not. There's so many, just like we are intricate human beings, there's so many layers that we need to go through. It's the same with the books and the business. Courtney.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of back up a little bit because you can't even get to the profit and loss if your books aren't up to date. And so this is for the DIYers, this is for the people who are doing their own books. Also, your profit and loss is only as valuable as your setup. So if your setup is wrong, your profit and loss may or may not be wrong, especially if you're using integrators and all of those kind of things. So I like to back up even more is like, if you're not even looking at your profit and loss and you don't even have your financials current, these things are not possible for you to even look at with accuracy. A lot of people come to me when they're getting a home loan or something like that, and they're like, I need it. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, how far are you behind? A year and a half. So that's where it's like, I'm just telling like shooting straight here. Like you cannot look at your profit and loss report. It will give you no value if your setup is wrong in QuickBooks or Xero or whatever you're in, and you're not up to date. So I just wanted to bring that into the piece because everybody else said awesome things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is so important. And it's so important to keep your books in order and to track it. I use an Excel. I worked with QuickBooks for years, and QuickBooks and I are kind of like, not talking right now. It's not a forgiving system. You make one mistake and then you got to spend hours explaining it to the board and to the members at large. I'm like, it was an error. Okay. My dog barked and I hit the zero one too many times. And, and it goes on. And I remember filling out the 990 EZ form and this LM3 that I had to do. And it's just like, okay, you got to write a paragraph as to why this is an error. And I was like, QuickBooks and I were not talking. So I've been using Excel. So I have a Mac. It's probably not even called Excel. What is it called? Note. I'm not a tech person. But I love it. Every single time I get the expense, I go ahead and put it in my little sheet, and I make sure I keep the receipt in my little folder so that at the end of the month I can go through and I triple check everything and just double check and say, okay. And then, I have my whole spreadsheet, and then I look at it, and one of the expenses that I use, and I know as Profit First, we look at this either as our owner's comp, and I know some people just take it right off the top from owner's expense or from operating expense rather, but it's coaching, like investing in coaching for ourselves, right? And I knew what that number was, but I hadn't added it up for whatever reason. I was like 4 or 5 months behind. And I thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm going to do my own program. And I added it up and I was shocked. It was like, what? I spent that much money? And then when you see that, you're like, oh, I need to make a change. And like, that's that, that thought process of the money mindset of like, okay, what are my goals? And setting those goals, I like to call them we all have a bucket list. So we all have our money bucket goals. And then what do I really want to accomplish here? And I think that's really important when we're looking overall at the finances and the different statements. So keeping that in order so that all of your numbers, all of your paperwork matches. And then when you give it to your accountant, they think you're the best client ever. And they're like, yes, I love you. Are there more of you out there? I need you in my world. So we have a question that came in through email late last night. So this is not something that you all were prepared for. So I kind of gave them questions beforehand, because I was like, I went into the group and I'm like, hey, what questions do you have for these ladies? And people were asking like questions that confused me. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're trying to say. And I think, like you had said earlier, that it's a very unique, like what you're doing for your tax purposes, what's your overall goal. So the question that came in was, when you're putting together your books and you're using software besides QuickBooks, what is the best system? Like you see commercials where people are scanning their receipts into their phones and then they're compiling whatever. So what's the best way that an accountant likes to receive the information? Courtney, you go first.
So I use QuickBooks. I am transitioning over to Xero as well, because just the nature of what QuickBooks is doing right now is kind of pushing out quite a few people. But so I like to use the method that works best for you. So Lisa, you're saying that you use a spreadsheet. If that works for you, great. If that is a system that works for you, freaking awesome. Do what works best for you. But always keep in mind, how much is that costing you? How much time is that costing you? Because when you use an accounting software via, whatever, Xero, QuickBooks, Wave, whatever, use the tools. So like I get people who come to me for, to set up QuickBooks after they've been using it for like 5 years. And I'm like, well, are you using the receipt reader? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, you're wasting time. Like, so try to do your best to use a digital receipt reader if you can. There are some that are outside of those software, like Dext, HubDoc, I think you can use without having it attached to another platform, just so that you have them all in one place. And I think then you can like even export it into like a mini profit and loss report for your CPA just from that receipt reader too. So just use the tools that are available to you, but that also do it. Like just make sure that you actually get it done. Because if you're just holding receipts in that proverbial box, that doesn't do anyone any good. And you're going to pay more. Just to be honest, like I charge people more when they have to mail me their receipts for me to scan, just because it's time, you know what I mean? But but if that works best for them, I'm going to do it because it works best for them. So I guess that's what works best for you. Try the softwares. If they don't, then find something that you can actually take care of and not use your memory, because memory bookkeeping is the freaking worst. Like it doesn't work. It just doesn't work, so anyways, I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that. I know a lot of my clients will go over their expenses and they're like, oh no, that's all I have. I'm like, what about that monthly subscription? What about, this membership that you're in? Oh yeah. Yeah. Don't do it from memory. It's so important to go back into your debit sheet and look, bank balances, whatever, what credit card or debit card are you using? And let's look at that for the last 12 months. Paige.
Yeah. So my first question is everyone in this group in the US?
Yes.
Okay. So I know Canada and, other countries have different rules for this, but if you're in the US, you're a coach, your expenses are most likely going through either your business account or your personal account. So the ones in the business account, maybe we're not as concerned with, because that's all at least together where we could fish it out. But it's the personal transactions that get in the way. And, sort of like, those are the ones you're going to forget, first of all. And then they're all over the place because you're scrambling like, oh, this account has cash today, this account has cash tomorrow. So the best thing you can do is just stay consistent. Like Courtney was saying, whatever works for you can work for you. I find that for my clients, the very easiest first step is to get a separate email account, because we're almost all using emails and a lot of your receipts are electronic. So if you can just create either accounting at your company or even a Gmail account, mycompanyaccounting@gmail.com, and just forward all your receipts there, at least it's in one place. And then the system can come later. You can upload them to, if you're using a digital, like a Google Drive, or if you're using Dropbox or something like that, it's very easy to then upload them there. Or you can use those fancier systems like, QuickBooks. If you're already paying for it, yes, you should be using its features. But if you're not there yet, then I think email is a good place to start to just separate it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I didn't even realize half those things existed, and we'll definitely put those in the links of the show notes so that those of you listening can check some of these out and see what works best for you. Like Courtney said, whatever works best for you is what you want to implement, but you want to implement something, right? You just don't want to keep them all scattered. Samantha.
So I like to say, keep it simple, especially when you're just starting out. The first thing I always recommend is get a business bank account and use it, because like Paige was saying, like if nothing else, if you don't do any other bookkeeping things, at least at the end of the year, you have your bank statements and all the stuff is on it, right? So get yourself set up with a business account. Try not to use your personal accounts as much as possible. If you have to use it, it happens, but just make sure you're taking note of those things. So you're not having to like scramble and go back and like read line item by line item to find what you're looking for. And yeah, just keep it simple. I know for coaches especially, like you might feel like you'll take money however you can get it, right? Stripe, PayPal, whatever. I highly recommend choosing 1 or 2 platforms that you want to accept money through, and the right clients will pay you the way that you tell them to. It's a one less decision they have to make, right? Is you give them the payment link, they pay. You would never walk into Walmart and say, hey, can I Venmo you for this? Walmart would be like, absolutely not. This is how we accept payments. Be a real business, right? Tell people how to pay you. Keep it simple. If you're using a spreadsheet, that's fine. If you want to get on a bookkeeping software, that's also great. But like Courtney and Paige said, just be consistent. Do the thing and do it the same. And I also like to recommend, if you're doing it yourself, do it once a week. And I'd say an hour. It doesn't even have to be an hour, but just take a little bit of time once a week so that it's part of your routine. Because otherwise, if you're doing it once a month, once a quarter, once a year, time goes by so fast, and the next time you go to it, you have to reinvent the wheel. You don't remember what you did last time. So allow yourself to have it be habitual and something you just do, so that you're making progress. I like to say progress over perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just do something, just a little bit at a time. And I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll just have to plug in. That's what we do when we date money. Once a week, we sit down with our money partner and we go over all the numbers, we plug in everything, and then we do our happy dance, our celebration dance. And I know as Profit First, we do twice a month. We kind of move money around and all of that. And it's so important to have that consistency. So thank you for that, Samantha. Regan.
Yeah, I want to speak specifically to habit creation and how to hack your brain. This is something that I've talked with people about very recently. I actually had somebody say, oh my gosh, you mean I can make like a beautiful scrapbook and put 12 like sections or folders in there for each month of the year? I'm like, totally. If scrapbooking is your thing and your brain wants to keep going back and doing that thing, link it to the tasks that you need to do. I like to make homemade paper. So I sort through my junk mail, I shred it, and I make homemade paper. That's my reward for going through my receipts every week. So like finding a way to like hack your brain to keep wanting to go back to that habit is going to help you form it faster. And then like task chaining or like task linking. If you can somehow link that task that you need to do to something that you already do like on habit, like automatically, it's going to be so much easier for you to do that. I also love that Lisa is like, I use an Excel spreadsheet. And Courtney's like, people can mail me their receipts. And I'm like, both of y'all can have that. I don't want none of that. I use QuickBooks Online. I'm an advanced certified pro advisor. If you're going to pay for bookkeeping software or some sort of accounting system, it needs to be able to reconcile your accounts and produce financial reports automatically. We're not plugging in numbers and formulas here. Like that's not my jam, but I love that for you guys.
Yeah. We all have our own little tools, right? Yeah. And I know lots of my clients, they'll use QuickBooks as well, and it works for them. I just, someday we'll make up and, and right now it's not an issue. It's my generation, like we didn't have all this software, when I was in high school, we still used pen and paper and the graph paper, the yellow little line paper. My mother-in-law was a bookkeeper, and when we were cleaning out her house, she had those big old, I don't even know what those are called, those big old ledgers, right? With the tiny little lines in the boxes. And she wrote really neat, like bookkeepers write really neat. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. I mean, at least Excel like does that for me, but yeah, it just depends on, what you're accustomed to. And I love the fact, like, when we create, Samantha has said about like, the bank accounts and stuff. So as a wealth activator, I'm like, keep your business money separate from your personal. It needs to be separate. And especially for, tax purposes as well. But like, like Samantha was saying, like, you start mixing this stuff up and you're like, what am I doing? You almost have to reimburse yourself to be legit with the tax laws and all of that. But just because for your own sense of mind, when you don't keep it separate, you're not really seeing the rewards of your business and what you're, I lost my train of thought here, but what is that dopamine hit? What makes you keep going to want to do this? And when you cross the streams, it just gets muddled and it doesn't really give you that momentum that you need. So when you create, I like to have a money bucket. So I grew up with the money envelope system, and we use the envelopes and our money would go in there. And I actually saw something online the other day where it was an advertisement and they had a scrapbook. They had the clear plastics, like, what you use for baseball cards. And they were putting money in there. And I'm like, no, don't put your money in there. Put your money in a high interest savings account. Stop it with this. What is it? What are they talking about? But I love money buckets. And I always tell, like, we have fun money. So I have my money multiplier system and 10% goes for fun. And we get a separate debit card for that. So all of our fun money is on that one card. And we can quickly open up our app and say, oh, this is how much money I can spend at this festival or, whatever I'm doing with my money. And then once it's gone, it has to be gone by the end of the month. And then when it's gone, it's like, that was the best month ever. I want to do that again. So how much fun money can you have? So, well, thank you so much, ladies, for being here, for sharing your time. We're going to put the links to connect with you in the show notes, but why don't you go ahead and share the best way to connect with you so those listening can hear. We'll start with you, Samantha.
Sure. So you guys can find me, I'm mostly on Facebook. So I'm Samantha Lynn Palisoul on Facebook. Feel free to send me a friend request. And then Little Town Bookkeeping also has a Facebook page. You can find me there. And then I will share this link with Lisa, but I have a new freebie for you guys if you want to take advantage of it. It is so that you can kind of go through the process of gathering all of your documents and information. If you are positioning to work with a bookkeeping professional, that onboarding process is usually really sticky for a lot of business owners because it's like, oh my God, I have all this homework to do before I can actually pass off the task. So this will lead you through that journey without having to even have talked to a bookkeeper yet, so that you can then find a professional that is best for you and have everything ready to go. So I will share that link with you, Lisa, to share with the audience. And
Awesome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Samantha. Thank you for that freebie. So yeah, those of you listening, be sure you check the show notes. Paige.
Yeah, so the best place to connect would be my website, booksbypaige.com, and that's Paige with an I. There we'll have my social media and everything linked. And yeah, if you want to just reach out to me and you have a quick question, like I'm happy to connect with you and give you a quick answer. I'm sure you have a lot of them inside of Lisa's group, but if there's anything specific that you're like, I don't want to make the wrong decision here, but I just need someone to reach out to, I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you, Paige. Regan.
Yeah, I am on my website at alleaseaccounting.com. Facebook and Instagram are both All Ease Accounting, and I spend most of my time on TikTok at Ray Hammer. That's my handle. But right now I want to let the folks watching know that you can go on an accounting date with me. It's called the Fourth Quarter Fling, and it's only available through the end of the year. So I'll make sure to send you that link.
I like that. It's all about dating money. Fourth Quarter Fling. Love it. Courtney.
You can find me on Instagram mostly, or my website, Courtney Boudet, BOUDET.com.
Oh,
and my Instagram is my name.
Okay, awesome. So be sure to check the show notes. And for those of you who are listening to this now, say hi, put something in the comments. And if you have a question, go ahead and ask it. We will get back to you with the answer before the close of the day. And if you know anybody who wants to hear this, check the podcast, I Date Money, and refer them to this episode, Visionary Panel of Accountants. We will be getting that loaded to the YouTube channel as well, Money Talks. And remember, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it's what you do with it.